Shout out to Elam on Patreon for 15 months of support.
Get weekly goods, tutorial files, mockups, templates, items from my store, and more, as well as supporting the free tutorials on this channel. Check out my Patreon in the description below.
Well, what's up guys, Qehzy or Noah here, bringing you guys another tutorial. Today I'm going to be showing you how to create this glitch text in Cinema 4D and a little Photoshop. Both the Cinema 4D and Photoshop files are available on my Patreon if you guys are interested in becoming a member, as well as these posters, which I covered in a Skillshare class that uses some of the same concepts. If you're interested in that Skillshare class, there is a link in my description for 2 months free of Skillshare where you can check that out. But anyways, let's go ahead and get started. So in Cinema 4D, we're going to try to create something like this. So this is actually in 3 nulls. So I'm going to go ahead and select all these and press Alt-G and hide them for now. And we're going to go ahead and get some text. So usually I do mode text, but in this case I'm going to do the spline text. And I'm in my Cinema 4D Light Studio, which is my Lightroom. You can get it in my store if you're interested, but you can just use any lights you'd like in Cinema 4D or one of my free Lightrooms in one of my packs, or any Lightroom you have. It's up to you, it doesn't really matter. Anyways, on this text I'm going to align it middle. And then you'll be able to see that I'm kind of at like an angle looking sort of down at the text. And that's how I have mine set up. You can look straight on, you can have it angled however you want. This is just sort of how I'm going about it. Anyways, I'm going to make my text say FX, since that's what I used before. And I'm going to come in and get this font. It's called like Acmo something. Acmo Display, SSI is what it's called. And you can see it's this nice like italicized font, but it's like a nice thickness that I wanted to use. So we're going to go ahead and do that. You can see there's some overlap at the top here, so I'm going to change my horizontal spacing to 5, just so we have some spacing between those. And then an important step here, come to intermediate points, change that to uniform, and I bumped my number up to 11, but you could do even more if you'd like. And now with that, I'm going to go to MoGraph Mo Instance. And I'm doing that because if you want to change the text later on, we're going to have a few duplicates of this Mo instance. And you can come in and just change this text and it will update the Mo instance. So you don't have to go through each individual one and change it. It's just an easier thing if you're not familiar with the instance. Now let's go ahead and get the extrude and add the Mo instance into that. And click the extrude. I'm going to make my depth 50 on this one. And then we want to go to the caps tab. And I'm going to go over to display and bring up my lines so you guys can kind of see what my lines are looking like, so you can kind of recreate it the best you can. So go to the bevel shape. I'm going with round and I'm going to make my size 0.5. And then I am going to come down to caps type. I'm going to do regular grid. Click the drop down arrow here, and I made mine 5 centimeters. Depending on how big you do everything, you might want to change the size. You might want to come back later and change the size, up to you. I went with 5, and then check quad dominant so we actually get the squares. Now you notice we have a grid on the front and it's on the back too, but in the sides here, it's not a grid. So we want to go back to object, come to subdivision, and bump that up. And I had 3 originally, but I think 4 will work as well. Could probably do 5, but I'm going to stay at 4. But you can see our whole text is covered in grids. And it's not perfect, we got some triangles and stuff, but that is absolutely fine. Now I'm going to turn off my lines, just go back to shading. And with extrude selected, I'm going to go to MoGraph and fracture. But I'm going to hold Alt while I click fracture with extrude selected, so the extrude goes into the fracture. And then we're going to go to explode segments and connect on the fracture. Go ahead and press Alt-G then, or right click group to put it in a null. And then we want to go to MoGraph PolyFX, add that to the null. And with the PolyFX selected, go to MoGraph Effector Shader and add the shader to the null as well. With the shader selected, then go to parameter and make sure scale is checked, but instead of 0.5 we want to do -1 and it will disappear, which is what we want for now. Come into the shading now, and this is where we can do some interesting things. So first of all, hit the drop down and go to noise, and you'll see we get some squares going on throughout our render here. Click the little thumbnail to bring up some more shader options, and the shader I used was Voronoi, but you can literally pick any one of those. Each one will give a different result, and it's kind of cool to mess around with them. So let's go through the settings here, and then be sure to come back to change some of the noise. I'm going to go to space, and I'm going to change this to world, and then the scale I'm going to bump up to 200. So there's a little less effect going on, it's more zoomed in. Animation speed, I'm going to go ahead and do 1 and set the loop period to 4. And that's just so we can come to the timeline and press play and see if we get any better results as we play. You might get some more interesting things as you press play that you like better than the original, so feel free to mess around with that. You can also mess around with the seed to get some different results, and we'll play around with that a little more as we go. Scroll down a little further. I'm going to bump up my cycles a little bit. I'm going to do 0.2. You can do more, but I don't want to do too much. It gets a little too crazy. And then finally, come to contrast and shoot that up to maybe like 90, somewhere high. And now you can start to see where our whole effect is going, because now we have some bigger squares and some smaller squares, and then a lot that disappears, which has given us this effect. And you can see this is what our little noise looks like. And if I come into the noise again, I can change this up to get some different results. You can see that's what Voronoi 3 does. Let's see what normal noise does. There it is. That's normal noise. That doesn't look bad. And you could of course mess around with this as much as you want. And like I said though, I like Voronoi. I think that's a good look. The last thing we're going to do with this null is add an explosion FX. And the reason to do this is because all these shapes and polygons right now are very thin. There's no real thickness to them. And you can actually use the explosion FX right here. Drop that in below the shader, and it'll disappear for now, but if we just turn everything to 0, so object, 0% time, explosion strength, 0. You can see if we go to cluster thickness, set that to about 2 centimeters. This gives everything some thickness, and you can see the difference. I just think it looks a lot better. You don't have to do it necessarily, but I think it adds a little bit to everything. So I like to use it. Feel free to use it if you don't want to, no big deal. But we are done with that null. So I'm just going to call this render, or you can call it whatever. But we're going to actually select it and press Command C, Command V to duplicate it. Open up the duplicated one, and we're going to make some small changes to it. So first things first, click the Mo instance, and then come to the effectors and get a random effector. And to keep things easy, drag that inside the Mo instance so we know it's associated with that. And go to the parameter, uncheck position, check scale, check uniform scale, and set this to -0.25. Go to extrude then, and bump this down. We'll go to about 35 depth instead of 50. And then finally we'll go to the shader and open that up. You can click that, the shader tab, and then open this up. Change the seed. You can just go up a few or down a few, whatever. And then global scale, maybe you move that to 300 instead of 200. Select the extrude then and move it slightly back. Okay, and then duplicate that one, hide what we were just working on, and on this new one we're going to do all the same things just with some different values. So go into that random, instead of 0.25 we're going to do 0.5. Instead of 35 depth on the extrude, we'll do about 20. And then the shader again will come in and we'll do 400 global and bump up that seed a little more. Maybe we change it to like 420. Actually, that's an awful looking map. Let's do 700. Okay, whatever, that works. Again, we'll select the extrude and move it back slightly. Okay, cool. And then we can click 0 on the timeline since we have those animation settings on, and we can click play and see what version of this we like the best. I'll click pause there, and I have global illumination checked on this, so I'm going to uncheck that real quick for previewing. And if I give this a render, we get something like that, which I think looks really cool. I would like some more thickness on the F, so maybe I wonder if I change throughout the timeline what we can get. Kind of like this one. Let's see what that looks like. Got some holes in the X, but you see what I mean? You want to play around with this to get some better looks, or a look that you like. But once you're done, you want to add some materials. So the materials we're going to be adding to the fractures. So I'm going to actually open all these, and I have my materials here. So I have two, ignore the gold, is these two here. So basically this one without the reflection is a gray metal from my materials pack, my most recent one in my store, my V7 pack if you're interested. This is a stainless DK. You can see it's just a simple metal texture, and then I have this pretty cool reflectance on it. And then this one here is a darker gray with no texture. This is my chrome material, slightly altered. And in the reflectance, it's the same spectral effect with a slightly different color on the layer color that's like a more yellow. But really, you want to get any materials you want. You could be metal or whatever, and you want to add this spectral to it. So get whatever materials you want, and then come to the reflectance and go to the layer color. And at this drop down, you want to go to, what is it, Effects, Spectral, add that, and then click this thumbnail. Also, my mix strength is at 15, but then click this thumbnail and you'll get settings like this. So I'm going to walk you through what I have here because it's a lot easier than doing it from scratch. But I have an intensity of 600 and a variation of 230, and then this is set to mirror. You could also do tiling. You guys might be familiar with this reflection from my facet tutorial as well. But then you want to add these gradients, or these colors to the gradient. Now to add a color to the gradient, you just simply click at the bottom here and it will add. And then you can click and drag down for it to be deleted. But you want to add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 colors, sort of like this. And the colors are, the first one is, I'm going to be using hex codes, B5F3FF. Second one is D152FF. Third one, FF7373. 4CE9FD. 6400CF. D8E65E. And finally, 73D6E6. So if you want to copy it exactly, you can do that, or you can pick your own colors. But I just wanted to make sure I showed you guys this so you have the same exact settings I do. And then pop that on your materials. And like I said, I have two that are slightly different. So I'm going to add this stainless steel one to this fracture, the chrome one to the second fracture, and then the steel one back to the third one. And there we go. It has a kind of gold look right now, but really it's not gold. If I give you guys a preview, you'll see the reflection just adds some colors to it, which is why we do it. And then we can make that color kind of pop in Photoshop if we want. But yeah, you can see this looks really cool. It has a very nice glitchiness to it. And we should end up with something sort of like this, which is the render I'm going to be using. So that's the goal. And then once you're happy with what you have, go ahead and render it out. Make sure you render it with the alpha channel checked so there's no background, and as a PNG. And I render mine like this: ambient occlusion, global illumination, object glow, but you can render it however you want. And now let's go over into Photoshop to add even more glitchiness. You can see this is kind of what we're going to be creating then. So I'm just going to get the render and drag it into my Photoshop icon in my dock, which you guys can't see because it's off on the other monitor, to open up a document like this. And I'm going to add a solid color, which will be our background, and that color is going to be 0C1220, so a dark blue, and just drag that down below. And we have our text. So the first thing we're going to do is add some glitch effects by just getting the rectangular marquee tool and creating some rectangles on here. So I created one, I'm going to hold shift and continue to add some. Okay, there we go, nice and simple. Now I'm going to press Command C, Command V, and it will copy that, and you can see we can kind of move that around. So I'm going to hold shift and move it slightly to the left. It keeps going down, come on. What is wrong with you? I have no idea why it's doing this, but this is so annoying. Go to the left. There we go. I don't want to go that far though, so let's just go, yeah, somewhere like that. So it's not a lot, but it's enough to notice the glitchiness. And we're going to press Command J on that to duplicate it. Press Command T, hold Alt, and increase the size. And you can see that gives us a little more, but that's a little too much. So we're going to come down, add a layer mask, get the brush tool, flip our colors so black is our main color, get a soft brush, which I already have, and yeah, I'm going to use a brush like 172 and just erase some of it. I don't like that top one. Yeah, there we go. So I erased some of it, so there's some bits poking off, but it's not too crazy. And there we go. So now let's select everything there and group it. Call it render for now. We're going to be creating a lot of groups, so this one will be render temporarily. Press Command J and Command E to merge, and then go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and I'm going to do 9.5. Click OK. Add another layer mask. Once you add that layer mask, press Command I so it completely hides it. Get your brush tool again, and this time we want white, and keep a pretty small brush, and we're just going to add a little bits of blur in here, so you can kind of click in a few spots. I like to click where there's some of the smaller squares and just add a little bit of that blur. So it's just a little bit, it's very subtle. And then come to that render group again, duplicate it, merge it, bring it below this time, go to Filter, Blur, Motion Blur, and I'm doing a distance of 262, and I'm going to bring down that opacity to about 40, and that should just be pretty subtle in the background. You can clearly see it now, but as we go, you will notice it less. Now group all of this, and then come down and, well, I'm going to name this FX now, and then come down and add a hue and saturation. Press Alt and click on that so it just is affecting the group as a clipping mask. I'm going to change the hue here to about -133 I have written down. And so this will be green and pink. And then I'm going to get another hue and saturation, but bump up the saturation of the magenta. So click Master, go to Magenta, increase the saturation, and you can see this pink starts to get brighter, which is what we want. And then let's get our text tool and get the font we used in Cinema 4D, Acmo Display. Click and add the text we used here, so FX. And just try to overlay this somewhat. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm going to do something like that. And we're going to go to Fill, 0, and double click, go to Stroke. And yeah, I already have the settings, so we're going to do white inside, and actually we want 8 pixels. Maybe we actually bump that down. Let's go 6 works. And double click on that and go to the Character tab and change the spacing to 5. So we have that little space. If you don't have your Character tab, it's Window Character right there. And then we can line that up better or wherever we want it. Obviously it's not going to be perfect, but I kind of like the imperfection of it. I think it makes it look a little better. So something like that. Now let's add a quick little color correction. So I'm going to come down and add a vibrance, bump up the vibrance to about 50, the saturation to about 20. You can see that brings out that color pretty good. And then add a levels and just bring this right guy in a little bit. So it brightens it up. Now below the vibrance, we want to create a new layer, and we want to get the green that's in here. So I already have it selected actually, and the pink. So let me grab the pink and get a soft brush on that new layer. Let's increase the size, and at the bottom here, I'm going to do pink. Oops. Pink, and then off to the side, pink. Flip it to green at the top, green, and then a small one in the middle that's green as well. And we're going to set that to screen. Let's go to 50%. Yeah, that should work. 50% opacity. And then we can zoom out here a little bit and maybe increase that a little tiny bit. Now we want to bring in some scan lines. So I just brought mine in ahead of time, and basically what these are a bunch of thin black lines. So mine's set to overlay 25% right now, but you can see at normal, these are just thin black lines. If I zoom in, so basically you can create these by creating a bunch of thin rectangles, and it's a little tedious, and you can Google it and find some if you want to do it that way. I figured I wouldn't show you because it's a pretty basic thing, so we're going to set that to overlay 25%. And now we can go ahead and select everything, group it, and then with Command G to group, and then Command J to duplicate, Command E to merge. And get the rectangle tool again, and we're going to create some more glitchy effects to the text or to the render. So go ahead and create some more rectangles on here. Probably do a little less than we did before. Something like this. And that should be good. Instead of doing what we did before, we're going to go to Filter, Distort, and Wave. And we're going to set that to, it's going to be a sine type, 5 generators, min 10, max 120. I think the rest is default, so 5, 35, 100, 100. Click OK, and you get something like that. You could also, if I leave those ants there, you could also go to Command U, change the hue slightly, and get something like that, which looks pretty cool too. I actually think I like that better. And yeah, we'll actually leave it there. And then finally, let's duplicate this twice. And you'll notice I used the green and the pink, and that was for a reason, because we want to do a pink and green RGB effect, if you're familiar with it. So if I double click this top one, I'm going to click the green, that gives us a pinkish. Let's double click the other one and uncheck the other two and leave green, so we have green. And then if I, on that green one, if I go on the arrow keys to the left once, then on the other one go to the right once, we get that RGB effect. But it's green and pink. It's just like that 3D effect, and it really makes it look cool. So that's the text. Pretty similar to that. Maybe we actually add a levels to darken this up. It's the wrong way in it. There we go. And there's our text effect. And of course you could continue to add some stuff there to make it even better. You could also play around with Liquify to kind of get what I did for my posters, which, by the way, if you're interested, check out my Skillshare link down below. Thank you guys for watching. Subscribe for more tutorials like this. Be sure to like the video. At 100 likes, I will be sure to post the C4D file for this tutorial in the description down below. But it's also available on my Patreon right now, as well as the Photoshop files. Be sure to also follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Qehzy, and that's Qehzy. Check out my website, noahpclient.com. Check out templatefc.com for mockups and pattern packs. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.